Aloha and welcome to part 3 of Tell Us More. This is Neaulani, Kuamo'o-Peck from EXP Realty, and I am so happy to be here to share with you a final episode of October's Tell Us More. Today I'd like to entertain you with stories from Obake Files by Dr. Glenn Grant. Dr. Grant was fascinated with the stories of Hawaii, the spooky occurrences that would go on. So let me start first with a mysterious occurrence at Schofield Barracks. Can rocks move by themselves, unassisted by human hands? Such a proposition would seem ridiculous to most rational people who believe stones are inanimate objects. It seemed ridiculous to the young engineer who in the 1950s was working on a roadway at Schofield Barracks, the U.S. Army base in central Oahu. Now retired, the engineer explained how they were grading a road in the field back of the base when the construction crew came across a huge rock rising in the middle of the projected pathway. Bulldozers were brought up to move the rock, but the base of the stone was so deep that it was impossible to shovel it out of the way. Tractors were then connected to the rock by heavy chains so that they could tow it out of the road. The rock wouldn't move. Conjecturing that the rock was actually only the tip of an iceberg of stone, the engineer decided that they would need to blast the obstruction so that the grading could proceed. Already a full day of work had been wasted with the rock. He scheduled the blasting for the following morning. Just after sunrise, he and his crew brought up enough dynamite to blow the rock to hell. As they drove up to the area, they were in store for the biggest surprise of their lives. We found that rock, which we had tried to move all day, he explained to me with wonder in his voice, on the side of the road. It was no longer in our designated pathway, and behind the rock was a long, dragging trail in the earth, as if it had literally crawled out of the way to avoid the dynamite. Glenn, he reassured me, I don't believe in ghosts, but I have never figured out how in the hell the rock that could have gotten off that road. I've never been able to explain it. Nobody was up there that night. That stone was stuck and immobile. But in the morning, there it was on the side of the road. You know, Hawaiians do believe that rocks have life. The pohaku, as their given name is, lives and breathes, and that they know certain things, protection, and being in the right places at the right time, that are beyond our knowing. Isn't that fascinating? Let's try another story, shall we? How about, let's see, right over here. All right, get over to the correct page here. There's a lot of great stories in this book. If you get a chance and you're enjoying these stories, do get the Obake Files by Dr. Glenn Grant. Fascinating reading. This one is called The Cursed Skull. One Saturday, an Army colonel staying at the Lanai Inn asked for a guide and bag boy for deer hunting. My husband was hired, and so he went along the next day. While hunting near the Garden of the Gods, the colonel found a huge human skull. Since he had shot no deer that day, he didn't want to go home empty-handed. He therefore took the skull home as a souvenir. My husband warned him to leave Hawaiian bones and artifacts alone, that the warrior spirit will follow him home. The colonel said he was not suspicious and did not believe in such supernatural trash. So he took the skull home, and we forgot about it. But a week later, the colonel called the chief of police, Lieutenant Takahasa, and asked if he knew a Roy Katsup Fujii, who was his hunting guide. The chief of police said yes, that he did. The colonel told him that he was shipping back on the next plane the skull that he had found in the hunting fields, and only Katsup would know where to put it back. When Lieutenant Takahasa asked him what had happened, the colonel explained that his bed shook every night after he had brought the skull home. He thought at first it was only a nightmare. However, when his wife and child told him that their beds shook every night without a windy storm or earthquake to explain such happenings, he became frightened. He was convinced the warrior spirit did follow him home and wanted to return the skull to its proper place. No mess with the spirits, yeah? Oftentimes, spirits give you only one chance, and that's it. Oh, let's see. Here's another story. I do have them marked. So yeah, there that. And here we are. This is called The Filipino Ghost of Kuamo'o-Peck Cemetery. During one of the many bus tours in the summer of 1985, this is Dr. Glenn Grant talking, that I used to coordinate for senior citizens at Neaulani Community College, I talked story during the lunch break with the bus driver concerning unusual supernatural experiences. He had been hearing me share some stories with the senior citizens and was anxious to explain what had happened in 1975 to his uncle. As he told the story, his demeanor and tone of voice revealed the sincerity with which he accepted the encounter as true. My uncle one night went to do laundry down in Kalihi Shopping Center area. He was driving by the old Kuamo'o-Peck graveyard about 11 p.m. You know which graveyard I mean, yeah? Anyway, who has driven on School Street near the Cam Shopping Center in Kalihi knows the Kuamo'o-Peck Cemetery. The grounds look somewhat deserted, with many graves seemingly turned over or even abandoned. In some places, the mounded graves looked cracked up, the earth buckling underneath them as if the coffins themselves are rising out of their graves. Michael told us later that he saw an old lady walking along the road next to the graveyard. She looked like an old Filipina lady, kind of hunched over, having trouble moving her legs. She wore a black dress and her head was veiled with a beautiful black lace scarf. He pulled over, rolled his window down and called out to her, "Hey lady, do you want a ride?" She didn't answer, but continued her hunched over decrepit pace along the sidewalk. Her hearing was probably bad. "Hey lady, you want a ride?" he yelled again. Ignoring him, she kept on walking. Now my uncle pulled right up next to her and really yelled, "Hey lady, you want a ride? No problem, yeah, it's safe." Now finally the old Filipina lady stopped. She had heard him. "It's okay, Tutu," my uncle said. "I'll take you anywhere you like go." She slowly turned towards my uncle's car and grabbed up to the curb where he had parked. He moved across the front seat so that he could open the door for her. Reaching out her hands into the open window, she stared in at my uncle, her face now visible. At this point in the story, the bus driver stopped to rub his arms. "Ooh, I'm getting chicken skin." He had given himself chicken skin even thinking about what his uncle had later told everyone in the family. But what the uncle saw as the old woman gazed into the car was a horrific image of death that sent him to a rest home for 6 months. For what would be rising from that old graveyard in Kalihi except the dead themselves? I've imagined time and again the phantom of the old Filipina, placing her hands up upon the window and looking into the face of the horrified uncle. The flesh on her hands was rotted and hanging, wrapped loosely over the long skeletal fingers. Her face dripped pieces of flesh as the blackness of 2 empty eye sockets gazed into the eyes of the uncle. The rancid gums of her toothless mouth were alive with small maggots, as she leaned forward to offer his uncle a graceful, pleasant smile. And so that is some of the stories from the Obake files. Hey, and let me tell you, these are true stories according to the people who had experienced them and given them over to Dr. Glenn Grant. And may I say, bless you, Dr. Grant, for putting these stories into a book so that we can all share them and keep them. There is a story that I experienced myself called The Story of the Choking Ghost. And what it is sometimes at night when you're laying in sleep, especially if you're laying on your back, you'll feel a presence in the room. And the next thing you know, the presence is pressing on your chest. And it's as if someone is squeezing the life out of you and you have a hard time breathing. And I remember when it happened to me, I was real small, probably about 3 years old. So maybe my imagination had part of it too. But I remember sleeping really heavy, really, comfortably. And all of a sudden, I felt this pressure on my chest, like somebody was sitting on my chest and I couldn't breathe. And I remember trying to call out for my siblings, my brothers and my sister and my parents. Somebody help me, but I couldn't talk because I was being crushed by whatever was sitting on me. And then after what seemed like a long time, I don't know, because I was small kind, I finally was able to sit up. And when I sat up, I could breathe again. Whatever it was had gone away. But I've heard over the years as I've grown, I was fortunate it only happened to me once, but it has happened to other people that I've talked to. So beware of the choking ghosts. And, oh, one other thing. If you stay on a big island and you're on Puna's side and you're driving along the country road, really dark out there because no more lights, really dark. And Puna is a Kuamo'o-Peck. If you see a wahine on the side of the road and she looks like she wants a ride, stop and give her a ride. Because if that's tutupele, you want to do something nice for her so she don't harm you. You stop, you give her a ride, she always gets in the back seat. And you be driving along, and 1 minute you look in the rearview mirror, she's in the back seat. She don't talk, she's just sitting there. And you drive along, next thing you look in the back seat, she's gone. What had happened is you were nice enough to give her a ride, so she left you alone. That's in Puna. Anyway, have a happy Halloween. Thank you so much for joining me for these stories. And do let me know in the comments below if you would like to see more fun stuff like this. It's all part of Tell Us More. And here in Hawaii, in Makakilo, take care. Hau'oli, Elenui, happy Halloween in Hawaiian, and aloha.